Thank you very much for this invitation. I am very sorry that I cannot be there personally. What I'm going to tell you today, I'm going to try to argue that it's not Trump that's creating the situation, but the situation that's creating Trump. I will hold that the world is at a turning point similar to the 1930s, and that we're facing either extended conflict or setting up a golden age. And one of the things that can help us understand what's going on is studying history. So I would like to share with you three ideas. That the pattern of propagation of technological revolutions is the key to understanding the nature of the current moment. That state action has been essential for unleashing golden ages in the past by providing directionality and facilitating what I will call dynamic demand. And that a re-globalization that expands development across the world, especially to the global south, can be the solution for global peace, prosperity, and sustainability. Much can be learned from studying the regularities in the 5 technological revolutions of the past 250 years. From the Industrial Revolution with its machines, factories, and canals, then the age of steam, coal, iron, and railways, the first globalization, the age of steel and heavy engineering, electrical, chemical, civil, naval, and the 20th century, mainly revolution, the age of the automobile, oil, plastics, and mass production that has been rejuvenated by China, actually. And the current revolution, the age of information technology, microelectronics, internet, and artificial intelligence. I include all of these in one revolution, basically because the way it has been deploying, it has been propagating. This arrow is only halfway. You will understand that as my talk proceeds. Each of these brings a techno-economic and socio-institutional transformation with growing inequality in the first half and the golden age in the second. The trajectory of technological revolutions is an S-curve with 2 very different periods. The revolutions overlap. We have the installation period in the first decades and the deployment period, which is the golden age, in the last decades. What's the nature of the installation period? It's a turbulent and unequal period of creative destruction, rise and decline of industries, regions, and countries, income polarization, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, some countries rise, some other countries decline. And we go from financial creativity at the beginning to financial casino like we have now. And major crashes. We have already had 2. I'm expecting a third one. I don't know if you are. The golden age is a time of creative construction. It's a time where instead of destroying the old, you are constantly synergistically increasing. One industry brings forth other industries and so on. It's a time when the proactive state promotes economic and social progress by setting up a win-win game between business and society. Production reigns with clear dynamic demand and stable, reliable regulation, especially inequality declines. And in between, what happens in between? Instability and uncertainty, political divisions, recessions, tensions, conflicts, resentment, and especially populism. That is why Trump is there. And not only Trump, all the other populist leaders across the world. We might be here then. And social progress requires shaping action by the state. And that's not only in China, it's across the world. What has the state done in the core countries of each revolution for promoting technological, economic, and social progress? Well, the installation periods are times of experimentation. So what has been done? Enabling entrepreneurship, ensuring finance is free to act, facilitating the enrichment of the few. And the state basically, when I say facilitating the enrichment of the few, that has to do with all the multi-billionaires now, which is the same as Rockefeller and all the others before. It has happened in Gilded Ages. The state basically stays out of the way, except in the countries like China now, which is forging ahead, and the US and Germany in the first globalization, which did more or less the same thing with a lot of help from the state. The turning point, the system is in danger. Populist leaders, good and bad, from Hitler to FDR, vie for power, offering to respond to social resentment. The golden ages are for reaping the fruits of the new technologies, providing a synergistic direction through taxes and policies for dynamic demand, modernizing government, regulating finance and ensuring access to it, reining finance in, reducing inequality, and guaranteeing both social and international peace. So golden ages have required bold and massive institutional innovation with explicit or implicit directionality. The golden ages are the Great British Sleep, the Victorian boom, the Belle Epoque, and the post-war golden age. Now, the historical role of the state is, among other things, about dynamic demand. Let's talk about that. What is dynamic demand? It is demand that grows at the same rhythm as the potential production capacity of the core industries of the technological revolution. Competent governments confronting inequality, popular discontent, and resentment, and facing a powerful technological potential without clear directionality, have applied a set of policies giving a socially beneficial direction to that potential and guaranteeing the availability of the appropriate demand for it. Of course, there were also colonies and other complicated things, but this is a 15-minute talk. For the most recent golden age of the mass production revolution after World War II, two main directions were set in the West: suburbanization and the Cold War. Suburbanization guaranteed growing demand for mass-produced consumer goods, with the welfare state and public infrastructure helping. The Cold War guaranteed demand for military goods and for technological advance through public procurement and funding of science. How did the welfare state and public infrastructure intensify consumption? We had public infrastructure for suburbia, which is, thanks to the automobile, it was possible to go to cheap land outside the cities. It eased construction of affordable homes requiring automobiles and electrical appliances. Public backing for mortgages made banks willing to lend to salaried workers. Unemployment insurance assured continuity in credit and mortgage payment. Pensions allowed spending salaries without fear of old age. Supporting strong unions made salaries increase with productivity and attained free time for leisure, shopping, and consumption. Free education and health made wages and salaries able to be all for mass consumption. Farm subsidies made cheap food free for freeing income for other consumption, and decent farm profits enabled using petrochemicals, which were, of course, part of this revolution. Plus the Marshall Plan and the World Bank, which funded the road, electrical, and other infrastructure for world demand. And the very important policy to induce consumption was to keep oil prices low for both consumers and energy-intensive industries. We need to keep internet prices low today and all the things that have to do with microchips. Look at the prices in the US during the post-war golden age. The general price index multiplied by 4 the price of gasoline and electricity divided by 2. So that was part of inducing consumption. Low-cost production of oil was mostly in the third world, and the more expensive oil industry in the US was given special low taxes and subsidies. And for the golden age of the steel and heavy engineering revolution, the previous one, the British Empire guaranteed export demand for financial, transport, and trade services, plus textiles, ships, railways, and other infrastructures through colonialism, global control of the gold standard, and London as financial center, plus the transoceanic telegraph and shipping routes. They had no need for tariffs. But the United States, for domestic demand for agriculture, capital, and consumer goods and materials across a gigantic country, they could keep their own home market. They didn't really not need much exports. They did it through high tariffs, regulation of interstate railways, but also controlling the trusts and imposing consumer protection laws on its growing food industry. So they did also worry about the quality of the demand. In Germany, domestic demand for agriculture and industry, again through import tariffs and tax breaks, but export demand for capital goods industries, because they did need exports. They were a very small country, through allowing cartels and more than 30 trade treaties with countries as far as Japan and as small as Nicaragua for its advanced industries, while also securing colonies. So each government took action adequate to its specific conditions and took social welfare measures. Germany ahead, Britain was a bit later. And all agreed on multiple international norms and standards in what was the first globalization. Many international organizations at the time. We now need a lot of supranational things too, maybe even truly supranational, but we don't have time for that. What are today's dynamic demand problems at this global turning point? Well, you all know that. Competition for the same high-tech markets in advanced products by the West and China, Western concerns about strategic dependency on China in a broad range of goods, high debt and low investment in the global South, leading to conflicts and massive migrations, insufficient investment across the world to avoid the irreversible climate change threat. And the two main dynamic supply problems stem from those tensions. The West is blocking access to advanced microelectronics and other products. Trump is going crazy. And China, in return, threatens to block access to indispensable inputs. The solution for all is unleashing a smart, green, and fair reglobalization towards the overdue golden age of the information revolution. This has been the longest installation period and the longest turning point across history. So let's talk about reglobalization. The transfer of consumer goods assembly from China to low-cost labor locations. China is already offshoring production, not only to escape tariff barriers in the West, but also to move up the value chain, increasing salaries and improving welfare systems in order to increase its own domestic consumer demand. So it's already beginning to do the right thing. The West is slowly understanding the need to friendshore beyond exiting from China. But all countries need consumer prices to stay low. for the well-being of the majorities. It makes no sense at all to think that production could go back to the US or to Europe, the things that have left. They left because they needed to leave, because they needed low-cost labor. Massive investment in consumer goods production across the global south would increase global demand while keeping prices down, and would create dynamic demand for infrastructure, capital goods, and services. And that is what the northern countries need to specialize in, because that is what this revolution is about. But the planet does not have enough materials for worldwide prosperous consumption of assembly goods. Durability, rental, maintenance, and recycling will be required. No longer selling and throwing away after 5 years. Both China and the West would need regulation to make rental, maintenance, and recycling more profitable than selling and wasting. By the way, selling, I can't remember what it's called. Yes, planned obsolescence was part of creating dynamic demand. When the market was saturated, they actually made products have some faults so that they would stop at 5 years. So even tricks like that can happen. And for software on the web to support diagnostics and 3D printing of spare parts. And that is obviously possible, feasible, and would be very convenient, because entering the consumption ladder would then become possible even with low income, and employment in maintenance would grow in both North and South. Another thing is that soon the so-called commanding heights of the economy will no longer be energy-intensive materials, but microelectronics, data, biotechnology, and new materials. It makes sense to move traditional materials processing next to mining in developing countries using local renewable energy with batteries, hydrogen, whatever innovation is necessary to make them regular. The transfer of these activities would create dynamic demand for the North in equipment, transport, infrastructure, technology, data services, as well as capital goods for renewable energy production. And the amounts to be transported would be drastically reduced and would further reduce the carbon footprint of materials. 7 ships come to China with copper ore, 6 are dirt. It makes sense to process materials in situ, and it would be a win-win game between the North and the South, and between humanity and the planet. But all this will require substantial funding, and countries are drowning in debt, while the global financial casino makes money from money not investing in the real economy, and enables massive tax avoidance, hurting their countries' economies. A supranational agreement for a global financial transactions tax, 1%, say, on any funds transferred between countries, would produce billions, trillions, and could serve to finance the green transition in the global south. And once development takes off in the various countries, further profitable opportunities will appear and become an incentive for the private sector to follow. The benefits of such a re-globalization would be many. A golden age benefiting all, while growing with the distribution of production according to capabilities and relative advantages. Conditions for peace by avoiding trade conflicts. The South would experience more development and less violence. The West would see a reduction of migratory pressures, and the world would be engaged in avoiding climate change, which would be a win-win game for all. Thank you.